Hello, my name is Wendy Ulmer, and I am the author of The Call. I have brought a few dragon friends with me back here, and they would like to come along in April to visit you too. So we'll see if we can arrange that. We're going to read The Call, chapters 1 and 2 today, and I want you to know that all the characters in the book have brown journals in their back pockets that look very much like your book. Inside, you'll find a map. Maps are always good for finding out what's happening with your characters and where they're going. So let's start with chapter 1, Lower Schola, which means elementary school. And every one of the chapters, or most of them, have a journal entry from one of the characters. And chapter 1 starts with a journal entry from Modo, our main character. And Modo wrote, "What if I'm not a magic? Gavin will never let me forget it." Modo sat at the kitchen table staring at his pancakes. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the old banjo clock and the chickadees calling in the trees outside. A soft breeze blew the kitchen curtains away from the windowsill, like sails on a boat filling with the wind. A single shaft of sunlight fell through the screen door onto the wooden floor and across the table, landing on Moto's small leather journal. The imprint of oak leaves and acorns on its cover seemed to almost glow in the sunlight. Moto touched a sliver of moon in the top right corner, the moon that identified him as the child of a magic. The sound of feet pounding down the narrow wooden stairs from the second floor jarred Moto from his thoughts. "Hey, little brother," Gavin exclaimed as he slid into the seat next to Moto, disturbing Finkel, their mother's cat. "You better eat up. You're going to need your strength today." Gavin laid his leather journal on the table next to Moto's wooden flute, a gift from his grandmother. Pushing his glasses up, Moto looked at the 3 crescent moons on Gavin's journal. Would his book ever look like that? Only if he got into Lower Schola. If he didn't, the sliver of the moon would become the star of a natural. "Don't look so worried," Gavin said. His green eyes twinkled. "After you finish off the 2 trolls, it's all downhill." He grinned as he stuffed his lunch into his pack and slid his journal into his back pocket. "Don't scare your brother," Mother called from the hall. "Let's go, Moto. We don't want to be late." Moto followed Gavin out the front door and watched as he raced across the porch, tapping the back of each rocker so that they all moved like a wave in front of the house. Jumping off the porch, Gavin ran ahead down the sun-sprinkled path to join his friends. They were all starting their 4th year at a Lower Schola and would soon take tests for Upper Schola. Having magic for parents didn't guarantee you would also be a magic. No one knew for sure if he or she were one until they took the test for Lower Schola. Sometimes, when Moto played his flute, the air seemed to shimmer like it was alive. Moto wasn't sure if that was magic, but today he would leave his test with either a crescent moon on his journal or a new natural star. Moto lived in the village of Anterg at the base of the Blue Mountains. There was a mystic stillness to the village, a stillness noticed by visitors and treasured by the villagers. In the evening, neighbors settled into rocking chairs on large covered porches, their houses snuggled up next to each other. Spider webs decorated the spindled posts and corners of the porches along the moss-covered walkways. As daylight faded, small colored lanterns glowed on the porches, shining like tiny jewels in the coming darkness. There was the heavy scent of deep pine, and the rooftops of the cottages wore pale green lichen cloaks against the evening cool. The plants and animals of Anterg were part of the community, a community where naturals and magics lived together in harmony with each other and nature. Dry leaves crackled underfoot as Moto walked with his mother down the narrow pathway between the cottages. Scattered along the path and among the cottages, pines, maples, and oaks shook their leaves in welcome as Modo walked beneath them. Sitting in a tall pine, Father's crow, Mercedes, watched over the walkers. "Look," said Modo as they walked the shadowy path, "there seem to be more fairy circles today than usual." Wispy circles of white cottony weeds dotted the dry leaves under the trees. "You're right," Mom agreed. "They're even on the grassy lawn around the school." Lower Scola sat at the top of a small hill, next to a tree-lined road that circled back to the main road. Several teachers and Principal Winkleberry lived in the cottages along the curve. After climbing the stairs up to the front porch, Modo found himself on a wide covered porch with round white columns. Large shrubs and bushes closed in around the foundation of the school. Opening the heavy wooden door, Modo and his mom stepped into a center hallway lined with knotty pine walls and worn flowered carpets scattered on the wide board floor. To the right was a door with a sign that said, "Lower Scola, come on in." They signed in with the secretary and took seats in hard wooden chairs. There were other young boys and girls there, some biting their nails or jiggling their feet. One by one, the children went into the principal's office. One by one, they came out, either crying or waving their journals in the air. "Moto Malarkey, please." Let's look quickly at one of the pictures. And I know it's clearer if you have it there in your book, but that's Moto and his mom walking to school. And down there at the very bottom of the picture, you see a circle with the little white dots. Those are the fairy circles. All right, let's go to chapter 2, because now it's Moto's turn to go in and meet the principal and take the test. Chapter 2. Principal Winkleberry sat behind an enormous desk in his office, which was filled with yellow warmth from the sunlight in the window. Principal Winkleberry was quite round, with full red cheeks resting on his polka-dot bow tie. A silver dragon appeared to be perched on his chest, hanging from a black leather cord around his neck. On the wall, behind his desk, a watercolor of trees hung a bit crookedly, and the faint smell of cinnamon and carnations hung in the air. In the corner was a wooden music stand with a single sheet of music on it, the Anthem of Anterg. An instrument case sat on the floor next to the stand. He always liked testing day for the new students. Their eager faces were wonderful to see, but of course there were always a few disappointments. The door opened, and a young boy with tight, dark curls and large green eyes behind blue-rimmed glasses stood in the doorway. But the boy wasn't looking at him. He was staring at the large green egg snuggled up in a nest of blue cloth. "Relax, Modo," Principal Winkleberry said. "Nothing in this test will hurt you. It will only take a moment. I imagine your brother Gavin tried to scare you, but that's what big brothers do, don't they?" "Yes, sir," Modo whispered. The boy looked scared, almost like he wanted to turn and run. "It's a simple test, Modo. I want you to look at this large egg. When you're ready, I want you to point at the egg and say your true special magic word. If you are a magic, the egg will crack open, and inside will be a small figurine of your animal magic companion. If nothing happens, well, then you will not be attending Lower Scola. Whenever you're ready," and there's Modo getting ready. Whoops. Can you see that? To take his test. I'm glad you have the books to look at the pictures. Principal Winkleberry sat quietly, watching as panic crossed the boy's face and shivered through his little body. He could hear the boy whispering, "Magic word, animal companion, Gavin." "Any time, Modo," Principal Winkleberry said with a smile, adjusting the bow tie peeking out under his puffy chin. The room darkened as a cloud moved over the sun. Suddenly, pushing up his glasses, the boy took a deep breath, pointed his finger at the egg, screwed up his large green eyes shut, and then, binga! Flew out of his mouth. Moto stood in front of the desk, not moving, and though his eyes remained closed, a look of amazement spread across his face. Binga, he whispered. Where did that come from? Principal Winkleberry didn't move or breathe, but sat with his eyes glued on the egg. There was a rushing in his ears as his heart beat faster, and he suddenly gasped for air. Moto opened his eyes at the sound and stared at the desk. Unbelievable, Principal Winkleberry half whispered, forgetting about Moto as the smell of cinnamon and carnations grew stronger. There was no figurine in the egg, though the egg was indeed broken in half. Sitting in the broken shell, like a very small child, was a baby brown dragon, his tiny feet, front claws grabbing his toes, his big ears laying against his scaly head, and his large black eyes looking up at Moto. Moto, said Principal Winkleberry, finally remembering he wasn't alone. Welcome to Lower Scola. Moto stood and stared. He couldn't take his eyes off the baby dragon. Principal Winkleberry knew how he felt. He remembered. Here's our little dragon. Well, said Principal Winkleberry, dragons choose their magics, and this little one has chosen you. What do I do with him? Moto asked, his eyes still glued on the little creature squirming around, his tiny claws scritching on the eggshell. Principal Winkleberry reached out, stroked the little dragon's head, and then moved his hand to the dragon pendant around his neck. It was so long ago for him, but it felt just like yesterday. Sir? Moto asked. Oh, yes. Well, for now you must keep him safe and well fed. I'm afraid he will eat quite a bit. Maybe this is a mistake, Moto declared. Why would a dragon want me? Principal Winkleberry smiled. I'm sure it's not a mistake, Moto. Your family will help you care for him, but remember, he is your responsibility. Moto leaned in and looked directly into the dragon's black eyes. The little dragon stopped moving, looked directly into Moto's green eyes and squeaked, Eeboo, Eeboo. Moto jumped back, falling into his chair. Principal Winkleberry chuckled, then became quite serious. Draken must still be alive. Sir, Moto asked again. Principal Winkleberry looked up. Sir, did you have a dragon? Actually, Principal Winkleberry replied, I did. His name is Draken. He has been the leader of the dragons in Blooming Valley for a very long time. Principal Winkleberry paused and then continued. But now there are some things you must know. Everyone who enters Lower Scola must promise to never tell anyone about their test or their individual magic word. You risk losing your magic if you share this information. Oh, Moto said. That's why Gavin wouldn't tell me anything. Yes, the principal said. Gavin did a good job. Keeping a secret is hard, especially from a brother. Moto sat quietly for a moment, still looking at the dragon. I promise, sir, he said. There is one more thing, Moto, Principal Winkleberry said, now clutching the dragon pendant in his hand. The dragon is unexpected. Draken was the last one in Anterg, almost 100 years ago. When a dragon arrives, it usually means there is some danger or threat developing. Until we know why he has come, he too must be kept a secret. Moto looked up and stared at the principal. Keep a dragon a secret? How am I going to do that? He's going to get big, and he'll fly, and he'll eat a lot, and... Easy, Moto, Principal Winkleberry said. For a few weeks, it will be like having a regular pet. Hopefully we will know more by then, and we can figure out the next step. But for now, we don't want to cause any undue concern. Now, I'm going to speak with your mother, and when you're ready, come on out. You can wrap him up in the blue cloth." "Thank you, sir. But how will I know his name?" "He just told you. The first word uttered by a dragon is his name." Principal Winkleberry watched quietly as Modo picked up the little creature and gently wrapped him in the blue cloth. Modo smiled. "Hello, Ebu. My name is Modo, and I'm a magic." Closing the door behind him, Principal Winkleberry stood a moment in the outer office. Although he felt happy for Modo, he was filled with sadness. And that's the end of chapter 2. So tune in the next time when somebody new will read you chapter 3. I look forward to meeting the rest of you in April. And until then, have a great day and enjoy the call.